Hello, Exiles. We are rather close to our Path of Exile 2 early access release. The Ascendancies have come out, and I thought I should get a little bit of skin in the game, because this is finally a teaser with some meat on the bones that I'd actually want to talk about and maybe throw my hat in the ring as far as ideas are concerned. I've already gone ahead and recorded, I want to say, an hour and a half full review of it. And then I thought about it and I realized this is ridiculous. No one wants to listen to this. I need to condense this down into something better. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the obvious frameworks for builds that exist as propped up by the Ascendancy nodes that we can see. That is to say, this is more of almost a guide, how to look at what the Ascendancies offer and use that as guidance for yourself, because everyone's going to be kind of in the dark. This is how to look at them and kind of give yourself direction on what to go for as you're exploring the game for the first time. I love this background, by the way. It's fantastic. Anyway. Some of these Ascendancies are going to be outright not recommended. Believe it or not, Infernalist is kind of one of them. Isn't it? Yeah, Infernalist, I think. Hopefully I'm not immediately getting the first one wrong. I do like her quite a bit. Loyal Hellhound is a very strong, generically good node. It has been confirmed that this won't cost spirit. It's just you get it for free. You know, obviously it costs you the Ascendancy passive, but that's what they say. 20% damage reduction all the time is rather good. Outside of that, everything here has a give and take to it that is a little harder to evaluate. I would say the biggest exception to that is maybe Altered Flesh, which if you can invest in Fire Res, make sure you have a lot of Chaos Res. This is a very powerful defensive node. It's going to help you quite a bit. The things that come after it are much harder to evaluate because we're not actually playing the game right this second. If you're not going Pyromantic Pact, I think Baydat's Gaze probably is the strongest, obviously, because you could do a Mind Over Matter thing with Altered Flesh, Loyal Hellhound. Suddenly you're very durable. Your stuff's protected. I don't know exactly how you would scale that. I guess you would kind of be doing like a weird Archmage thing. But I think that might actually be potentially one of the tankier versions of doing it. But what I really want to talk about before we move on from this, because again, I don't think this is the best one for people to start with unless you're very confident in your ability to make things work in Path of Exile. I think Demon Form is kind of a dangerous choice. It's the lack of hard numbers and lack of understanding on how we can enhance our character's recovery makes this look very dangerous. When you have both, you have a maximum cap on what degen you're going to be taking. But until we know what that is and how to build around it, this whole thing is a big I don't know. We don't even know how good it is. It just says it vastly boosts the power of your spells. It sounds like Righteous Fire, but like on opposite day, I guess, flavor-wise. It seems strong, but I don't think anyone who starts this is necessarily going to be having a good time. If you're a more confident player, I would say Pyromantic Pact has the most obvious potential for making a strong character. The follow-up nodes are both very potent in the sense that you could have powerful ignites, you could have a bunch of extra damage, you could have both, like with Loyal Hellhound, and that would work because Pyromantic Pact is maximum mana replaced by maximum Infernal Flame. It solves your mana. That's a very powerful attribute. I think that's what makes this kind of a step above most other things. So if I were going to do this, I would probably ignore most other things and take these four together and plan it out from there, and then just be ready to move around in case I need to drop some damage. I'd think of Altered Flesh. If I needed even more damage, I'd think of Grinning Immolation, which this node, if you can get it running, I think is probably one of the stronger ones out there. That's a big critical damage bonus, let me tell you. That said, it seems very difficult to evaluate how this is going to play, especially with the new pacing of the game. So I do not recommend it, although I think it's going to be strong. These numbers, a lot of them might need to be tweaked before this feels good. And while GGG is better at getting things like that right the first time than other companies, there's no guarantee that you're going to have the best play experience playing this. I would leave that to someone who is willing to really, I don't know how to put it, hash it out, tough it out, you know, get it going the way it should. There is always the chance that this is all completely busted and you're going to have a blast from the get-go, but I think there's much safer bets for that. Speaking of not safer bets, this is another one that I think is a little dubious in how effective it's going to be. Quicksand Hourglass, only having the bonus, this one here, Quicksand Hourglass, only having the bonus a third of the time is going to feel bad if every time the bonus comes up, the boss is winding up a slam. That's just That's my worry, and it's going to happen probably more than you think. Anytime it does happen, it's going to stick in your mind because it's going to feel really bad. That said, the recoup node is very strong, especially if you can really super invest in it. Apex of the Moment is insanely good. That's Blasphemy Temp Chains all the time, always. Now and Again looks very powerful with triggered effects, just as a way to bypass cooldowns. These other activated skills seem very strong. I don't know how good they're actually going to be. Time Freeze seems to be the most useful. Time Snap definitely has high application, but giving up an entire ascendancy for this single ability seems, I don't know if it's enough, because it's only going to be there when it's there. And when it's not, it's not. But Now and Again is always there. And for an ability that triggers, I think this has a lot of potential. And also just in general, there's going to be more cooldown abilities in the game. So being able to double tap them, this might actually be a much stronger node than I give it credit for. And if it is, then I would say this probably should be recommended, but I can't know that. And I feel like the defensive bonuses here are strong enough, but the offensive bonuses are very dubious. So this is another one that I'm not 100% on board with. All right, here is my first proper recommendation. This is the Gemling Legionnaire. They are good at everything. Yes, everything. There is no character you can make that probably will not work with Gemling Legionnaire. And I say that because these bonuses are universal always. Even if you're playing a stat stacker, you actually have a reason to play this character. So I'm just going to walk through it real quick. The quality of all skills +1 to level of all skills, that is Ashes of the Stars built into your character. That's kind of a big deal because Path of Exile 2 probably isn't going to have that same power curve. +1 to level of all skills is always going to be good. It's going to be especially good if you're a spellcaster, right? Left side of this tree, very much so consider spellcaster, because these bonuses are going to be tremendous for them, especially if you get them early, and you can get them pretty early. If you're going ranged or melee, just an attack build, integrated efficiency is probably going to be the better one. Using 2 copies of the same support gem is just going to be really good. I think if you were going like an elemental attack build, what is it? The elemental weapons damage support, whatever it's called now, double tapping that is going to be so good. The added damage supports are going to work the same way, where just some supports are going to have a better intrinsic value. And if you can run multiple of them, that's probably going to be like a major net gain in damage. Additionally, 3 additional skill slots is flexibility for defensive skills, flexibility for things that maybe consume spirit, but only consume a little bit, and you could have a lot of them, and you're constrained on the amount of skills you can have, because I get the feeling that's going to be a very important resource. And probably the most important part is you need this to get to Thaumaturgical Infusion, which I think is going to be like potentially one of the absolute strongest scaling ascendancy nodes in the entire game. You can get all of your skills up to like, what is it? I think it's a 6 link now, right? If you have 3 additional skill slots, that's 5 additional supports. That means 15 additional supports on top of the base. That's on its own going to be +1 to all max res, well, max elemental res. Just from that, add that into all of your other skills, this is going to end up being a lot of max elemental res once you have the stuff behind it. And if you can do something like maybe the Infernalist can from an item or whatnot, where you can convert the damage you're taking, you could super invest into a single gem color. And Gem Studded even helps you with that. Like the way this character can come together and basically cover its own weaknesses seems to be very strong. It's almost guaranteed to have good damage. I think maybe some of the best damage. The only thing that's a little uncertain maybe would be defenses, because Thaumaturgical Infusion, you're not going to have that doing an incredible amount for you early on. So you're going to have to probably invest a bit more on the skill tree. But I think that's going to work out fine, simply because there are so many things you can do with this Ascendancy that are just going to help you in a really generic, widespread way that's going to make sure everything feels good. Deadeye. I have nothing to say about Deadeye because it hasn't changed. I mean, it's changed a little bit, but if you're playing ranged attacks or ranged spells, absolutely you can take it, and you want to do evasion as your defensive layer, sure. I would stay away from the frenzy charge nodes. This is intended for something. I don't know what it is, but they definitely put these in there intended to be interacted with certain things. Eagle Eyes is good if you're like, I want to blast clear speed right away. Otherwise, you take 4A or 4B, you take Gathering Winds, and then some combination of 5, 6, or 8, you know? 2 marks, obviously, would be rather strong. An additional projectile, always good. Wind Ward for like one-shot protection. That's all going to be up to you. but it's very generic. I think it's safe enough to say that if you wanted to start with this, you'd be fine, but it's going to be boring, which is kind of why it doesn't really get the full recommendation. And the stuff up here, these first three, I find these are a little too specialized. I feel like there's no way, well, Eagle Eyes maybe not, but these two especially, Avidity and Thrilling Chase, really feel like they're going to get changed at some point to be a little more generally useful. And I could be wrong. Maybe the game is well designed in such a way where getting frenzy charges is easy enough that Avidity makes sense. But this looks, I don't know. It looks unsatisfying to play from a distance, you know? And then the consuming frenzy charges only has a 50% chance to be doubled. I would rather 100% chance to do 50% more, if that makes sense. You know, I would rather it be consistent. On to the next one that I wholeheartedly, happily recommend. The Invoker. Invoker is fantastic. Monk class looks really cool, but Invoker, especially to me, looks like it's going to have just a very solid framework for whatever you want to do, as long as it's obviously within the damage profiles that it supports. Outside of that, Invoker says, lead me through grace and protect me from harm. Get a high evasion body armor to get you lots of spirit, and then scale your evasion to the moon, and you will get both dodge and physical damage reduction from that evasion. You see 40% less evasion rating, and maybe that scares you, but you have to consider if you were going to do a hybrid armor where you had evasion and armor on your character, you would have to invest into both. You're getting a lot back in the sense that all of your investment can go purely into invasion. I keep saying evasion this way, which I think makes this even more powerful than people realize. I think you get back skill points compared to the hybrid build that would normally happen. Meditate also looks pretty strong. It's a little more interesting and hard to evaluate at first glance. I feel like maybe there is some bossing options where Meditate can be used to, I don't want to say cheese mechanics, but definitely allow you to brute force them, maybe. Depending on what the cooldown of Meditate is. If there's no cooldown, you can definitely brute force mechanics with this, where you are just like, you get hit and then you start meditating again immediately and you just juice your energy shield. I feel like that could definitely be happening. Outside of that, you gain a percentage of your damage as extra cold or lightning. If you're inflicting ailments, Unbound Avatar becomes a massive option for just popping off. And that's probably going to be a big thing with the way the pacing of the game is changing. Sunder My Enemies is a better version of the Templar Inquisitor node. It's literally the same thing, except now if the resistance goes negative, it won't ignore that. So that's just better. And then Scatter Them to the Winds, I'm not sure how good this is. If this is actually a skill in your character sheet and you can hook up support gems to it, this is going to be incredible. If you can't, I'm not sure why anyone would take this, other than like really early on. And I don't know enough about meta skills or energy to even comment on this. But it's there and the value looks decent, so if those are good, that's good. Overall, I think this is a very well-designed Ascendancy. I think it's right up there with Gemling Legionnaire, where I look at everything on here and I can't fault a single node. I think it's just strong, but there is some rightful concern about the actual monk classes, so I feel like you take all of this and then you don't use monk skills. If I'm being perfectly honest, just like cast spells or something with it and you'll probably have more fun. Because, I mean, you don't have to do Scatter Them to the Winds. You could just do Sunder My Enemies with I Am the Blizzard on, say, some sort of ice spell build, and you'd probably have a great time with it. You know, scaling crit, or again, the same thing, but using I Shall Rage if you're not scaling crit, right? Control Destruction looks like a strong support. And that removes your ability to crit, but who cares if you're chilling them? All right, Witch Hunter. One of the coolest flavors and one of the most awkward executions. I do think Weapon Master, Witchbane, and No Mercy are all very strong nodes that are going to have great potential. I think Culling Strike has been overly neutered. Only culling unique enemies at 5% feels wrong. It just doesn't feel like enough. And then Decimating Strike being so random, I really hate to say that, because Decimating Strike is so great for the fantasy of the game, especially as the spiritual Diablo 2 successor. This was definitely brought out to evoke Crushing Blow or Static on the Sorceress, where you just hit an enemy and when they're high on HP, and you remove a percentage of their life. And that's awesome. I love that. I don't like the range. I would rather it be like, I don't know, 25 to 15%. Because if you hit the 5% with your 5% cull, these two nodes together are now worth a total of 10% more damage. That's not good enough. You know, that's not good enough. Maybe Decimating Strike is good enough, like in clear, that I'm undervaluing it. But if I wanted clear, I would take Zealous Inquisition, which is definitely going to be amazing. An enemy exploding for 100% of their life as physical damage is nutty. Unfortunately, I think Sorcery Ward is pure bait. There is no way the numbers here are correct. 50% less armor and evasion, it's cutting it in half. Unless you're just not doing armor and evasion, this isn't really going to work. And if this works like the Elementalist node, it's not going to be very good anyways. And then like, oh, okay, so Ceremonial Ablution, that's a word. Ceremonial Ablution, it makes it better, obviously. But if your armor and evasion are being cut down by this much, either investing into your armor and evasion is not necessary, and it is only for characters like this who have it cut in half, or you can invest so much that you trivialize the threat of anything that you can like defeat with armor and evasion, which is definitely not going to be the case. So you're giving up way too much for something that really does not look like it's going to be strong enough. And again, it's one of those things, Sorcery Ward is not going to be up all the time. You're going to have moments where it's gone. And I think that's what gets me. If Sorcery Ward were like a passive reduction on top of everything else, I'd feel differently. Like if this also gave me 20% reduced elemental damage taken, I could kind of see this working. But I feel like this 50% less number is going to change to 80% before the early access is over. That just does not look good. I will mention, for those who don't realize, Witchbane No Mercy are incredible. You have to keep hitting your target, which kind of makes the skill ceiling for this a little high. And if that concerns you, I would say stay away from Witch Hunter, especially. But if you can play around the concentration and keep it broken once you break it, this is very, very powerful, because reducing the cooldown recovery rate on like bosses and stuff means their bigger attacks are going to come out less often, and you're also going to get 30% more damage. That's just flat out good. All right, Titan. This is, in my opinion, the number one choice if you're a new player, or if you're an unconfident player, if you need reassurances that things are going to work out. This is the one to take. Not just because it's strong, but because it gives you very obvious direction. It says, pick a slam skill and hit stuff. You know, Earthbreaker, Ancestral Empowerment, Crushing Impact, Surprising Strength, all very, very strong damaging options. I'd say Earthbreaker and Ancestral Empowerment are more damage. Crushing Impacts and Surprising Strength are kind of similarly good damage, honestly, but with a bit of survivability mixed in. You could probably take all four eventually. Like once you solve the rest of your problems through gear and skill tree, you could potentially take all four of these and just slap stuff, you know, almost kind of playing like a Berserker in Path of Exile 1. Or you have Stone Skin and Mysterious Lineage to kind of show up your defenses, right? You only take one of these two combos for damage. And if you're not sure how the actual combos work, Earthbreaker causes aftershocks, which means 20% of the time when you do a slam, it will repeat at the same place in exactly the same way. Ancestral Empowerment will boost your slam to do 20% more damage and have 20% more area of effect every other slam. These can synergize because the aftershock states it will be exactly the same as the initial hit, meaning the ancestral boost should carry over. Maybe that's not conveyed well here, but that is what the text says. So if that's not what's supposed to be said, I'm sorry, GGG. You should clarify that a bit more. Crushing Blows is a Crushing Blow is an attack that will stun an enemy when they can be stunned. So this is a bit more complicated. It'll make sense in the game when you're playing it, but basically enemies get stunned in the same way that enemies in, say, Elden Ring do, where you have to repeatedly hit them to kind of break down their poise, or in this case, their heavy stun buildup. And when you do that, Crushing Blows will say all of your hits will do it. You don't have to have a special skill for it. And then the point after that is once that actually happens, you get a huge damage bonus against them. And that on its own, I think is rather good. The one part of this tree that I want to say people should stay away from unless they're very confident players, especially when it comes to making their own build, is Colossal Capacity and Hulking Form. Colossal Capacity is great because it adds 20 inventory slots, and if you played Affliction, you love the backpack. This is a golden boy node. Everyone's going to love it, but no one will take it unless they're taking Hulking Form. And I do think Hulking Form actually is probably the strongest node in this Ascendancy. 50% increase of small passive skills is going to have some massive raw like number value to your character, but making use of that right away, that's going to be incredibly difficult, I think, for most characters. I could be wrong. If you could get enough survivability from this, you could take these two with one of these other two, and it would be just fine. The only problem with Hulking Form is it's probably intended to be made use of with mechanics like stat stacking or going after specific stats that are hard to get in bulk, because that is actually how it worked in the Atlas passive skill tree in Path of Exile 1 with a very similar node. And this is going to be strong, but it needs to be figured out, I think, before it is going to show that strength. The rest of the Ascendancy is very good, though. This is an A+ Ascendancy. I think this might be GGG's best work because it's very easy to understand. The effects are dynamic, except for the ones that defend you. Those are simple and easy to understand, which is how they should be, I think, generally speaking. It's just... It does stuff, and it does stuff good. And I think it's almost hard to mess this one up. All right, Blood Mage. Blood Mage is nutty good for a lot of reasons. You have to get Sanguimancy at the start. This is the only tree that does this, but that is fine. Sanguimancy is perfectly okay, and it introduces the entire downside of the Ascendancy, which is also fine. You're going to have to pay life as well as mana. As kind of a trade-off, when you kill enemies, they'll drop life orbs like in Diablo 3 and Diablo 4. So if you come from those games, this might be appealing to you, and I do recommend Blood Mage even to newer players. Because while this looks complicated, the rest of it is really not. Outside of that, your critical your critical hits will spawn life remnants every few seconds as well. And your life remnants can overflow your maximum life. So there's a little bit of like cheeky max hit potential from this node, even though you are dumping your own life to attack. Outside of that, Vitality Siphon can keep you topped off. Blood Barbs is awesome. 10% damage is already good. Your elemental damage contributing to bleeding has very silly potential, I think. There is probably a bleed spell build out there, or I don't know if there are bleeding spells. I assume there are because this looks like a spellcaster tree. But even if you went like elemental attacks, you can probably get a very large raw hit to apply a massive bleed. And that's rather cool. Curses have infinite duration is it's good if you need it, I'll say, but you're gonna know if you need it is probably what I would say about that. Now the good stuff is down here at the bottom. Gore Spike and Sunder the Flesh are innately massive damage in a very big way. They also reward you for stacking life, which is awesome. Increasing your critical damage bonus for having life is really good, right? You have 4,000 life, then you have 100% increased critical damage bonus. Sunder the Flesh sets your base crit to 15%. So if most people's spells have a base crit of 6% and they have 100% increased critical strike chance, then they have a crit strike of 12%, right? That 100% increase just doubles it. If you have that same 100% increased critical strike chance on Sunder the Flesh, you have a 30% chance to crit already. This is nuts. This is so nuts, the squirrels are trying to steal it. I don't know what else to say. It is crooked levels of good. I get the feeling it's going to be totally busted, and yet at the same time, long term, it's probably not going to be the best because things like Grasping Wounds and Crimson Power are going to offer you a much more powerful way to both defend yourself and make your life pool bigger. So if you could get the crit to the point where Sunder the Flesh wasn't maybe necessary, Crimson Power might actually offer you more critical synergy with Gore Spike down the line, depending on the skill and the build, obviously. But this looks very easy to play. You can just take Sanguimancy, you can take Vitality Siphon, Gore Spike, and Sunder the Flesh, and I think you're having a good time. You're just going to have a lot of life. Everything's going to kind of maintain you. You're going to have a lot of crit, and then you solve your problems how you have to, but you have very strong, obvious, easily understood stats that are kind of propelling you forward at all times. All right. Chayula Monk, Shadow the Hedgehog, if it were a Path of Exile character. Look at all of the edge, but don't look too hard. You will cut your eyes on it. I actually think this is very good. That said, 789 here, the whole darkness mechanic, don't the math is not here. I don't know why Inner Silence even exists. Like Inner Silence should read you have spirit equal to 50% of your darkness or something. I don't know, some percentage of your darkness, because removing all spirit is a huge downside. And what you get back for it is Chris Wilson calling you an idiot and stealing all of your Magic the Gathering lands. This is really bad. I do not touch this unless there's something about it we don't understand. This is the hot garbage. The rest of this is very good. Instant Mana Leech, nice. With Mind Over Matter, that's a big HP gain. If you don't want Mind Over Matter, Consuming Questions will make your Mana Leech apply to your Energy Shield. So now you have Instant Energy Shield Leech and Instant Mana Leech. For 2 nodes, you have gained potentially a ton of survivability, and you have fixed your mana issues. That's amazing. Chayula's Gift is a double-edged sword. If you don't have positive chaos resistance, this is a fair warning. That double effect will double the negative. You'll actually go lower. So I would say don't touch this unless you understand it. I get the feeling this is meant to be used with a unique item of some sort, probably something that will synergize with having maximum chaos res and converting the damage you take to chaos, and that will be very strong. Outside of that, Reality Rending is just a good damage node. It's not as good as the Path of Exile 1 version if you come from that and you understand that. This does not say non-chaos damage, it says damage. So there is no conversion shenanigans. If you don't know what that means, don't worry, it's not intuitive anyways. That said, I think Waking Dream and Lucid Dreaming are both very good nodes. Waking Dream, letting you be in a breach all the time is cool. I don't know if breach rings are going to work like they did in Poe 1 where they double the effect. I know breach rings do something and exist. I don't know that it's necessarily that, but it does mean you're in a breach all the time. And that's pretty great. While you're in the breach, the Red Flames of Chayula will leech you life. That's an important thing to consider. Because it is leeching you the life, it's not giving you leech. It is recovering life to you, and it is counted as leech. So the blue ones that leech you mana, those are actually going to apply instantly, which is nice. And it will also recover your energy shield. So there's a lot of recovery opportunities here. But probably the more exciting part is the purple flames, which give you a 7% of damage as chaos damage for 5 seconds buff that stacks up to 10 times. I cannot emphasize enough that this purple flame of Chayula effect is basically Grasp of the Void without the downsides. I'm pretty sure it's just better, except that you could have Grasp of the Void up more often, but at the same time, yeah, Embrace the Darkness is so bad. Lucid Dreaming, Waking Dream, Reality Rending, Ravenous Doubts, Consuming Questions all look like good nodes. I think you want Ravenous Doubts guaranteed on a build, and then if you're Mind Over Matter, you can skip Consuming Questions. Otherwise, if you're not Mind Over Matter, you definitely want Consuming Questions, and that kind of creates that leech base for you to survive on. Life Leech is still good. It is still good because you're going to want to maintain your life, unless you're CI, which, again, this is probably a very good CI option. That said, again, monk skills aren't necessarily good. I would play this on just a character that casts spells, again, to be safe. I could be wrong about that, but just play this on a spellcaster. Being able to fight at range is probably going to make Flames of Chayula feel better anyways, and Reality Rending is going to be strong with everything. None of this is melee specific. You can do whatever you want with it, as long as you don't embrace the darkness. Don't. Doormaver, good Ascendancy. I would not have recommended it early again. If you were going to play it early, take the chill nodes for some survivability, and then figure out what you want to actually do with your character. If you're critting a lot, Tempest Caller is good. Rain Dancer makes it better. I don't know how good this is going to be because I don't understand how these skills work exactly. If you can add sockets to them, then they have great scaling potential. If you can't, it's probably going to fall off. Scouring Winds, very good. This is universally good as long as you're dealing elemental damage. This will also work with fire. That's important to consider. And if you have Shaper of Winter, that also works that way. You don't even need Shaper of Winter. If you're already doing cold damage, you could just do Heavy Snows and skip this entirely, right? Which that I think is rather strong as well. I think the Arcane Surge nodes might be among the strongest available, just in general. Like this is where your damage is going to come from. If you are playing this class, you want to be fast. You'll have Arcane Surge. It will cover your mana regen needs. It will give you more cast speed. And then Force of Will scale your mana values to make that Arcane Surge effect bigger. And yeah, I think you play this on probably a non-Mind Over Matter Archmage. Yeah, I'm actually thinking non-Mind Over Matter because I'm not entirely sure how to make that. I guess with the Arcane Surge mana regen scaling, mind over matter is going to be fine. But again, this is why I don't necessarily recommend this, because it's going to be kind of difficult to understand. If you're not ready to hash it out and really invest the time to understand it, you probably want to wait for a build to come out that you can follow and like get a baseline for, because this is going to be, there's going to be a lot of numbers that have to be figured out. So this is like for the experienced players, sure, but if you're not that experienced or you're not confident in making your own builds, this one could definitely trip you up in a big way. All right, here we go. Just like the Titan, the Warbringer is perfect for new players. It's just, there's not many things here that look like they're going to hurt you. My only concern is Jade Heritage and the Encase and Jade skill. This looks like a really strong defensive asset, but if it doesn't let you cancel it early, I don't recommend it immediately. I'm just like, I'm out. But the reason why I like this is because Answered Call and Wooden Wall is huge potential for a build. I think the very obvious thing to do would be to go ahead and grab the new Ancestral Bond Keystone. And you're like, what does this do? Oh, you have unlimited totems now, and they reserve spirit instead. That is very strong in and of itself. And the reason I bring that up here is because Ancestral Spirits will cause you to summon minions when you summon a totem. This lets you use your spirit for both in equal measure at all times. So now you can have double the things fighting in your stead while you stand in the back and not die. And that's just very strong, especially when you consider that you can go for block nodes, or you can go for Warcry to support yourself or your totems, your minions, etc. Warcaller's Bellow, Exploding Corpses, means that if your minions or your totems kill something, you can probably clean everything else up with a few Warcries. You can ignore cooldowns and be a Shout Barb from Diablo 2, which is really cool. I'm sure there's going to be a damaging Warcry. I know there's already kind of a corrupted blood thing going on there, which is like even kind of another way to never actually deal damage while dealing a lot of damage. And then just the potential for tons of block that's universally viable is going to be huge survivability potential. So you have so many ways to make sure this character can get it done. And it's not going to have to be like in the fray while doing it, which I think this might be turn out to be one of the tankiest early options. And it's going to be a great character for learning how to fight bosses, because you can put your totems down, right? As long as you're invested in totem and minion stuff, you put your totems down and then you just back up and you watch the boss while they do the fighting for you, and you keep them up and you block stuff and you Warcry occasionally and you have a great time. 10 out of 10. This is another one that I think it would be very hard to mess up, but it is kind of contingent, I guess, on the idea that you are kind of going for this combo, which, yeah, I mean, you kind of have to go for this combo if you're going this way. I guess you could do Anvil's Weight and Imploding Impacts if you wanted to do like a melee character, because breaking armor is good. Reducing it below 0 is incredible. That's armor penetration. So I cannot deny that as a raw melee character, this will absolutely work. But the very easy new player / figuring out the game option is definitely Answered Call and Wooden Wall. These are going to improve you a lot. But if you hate totem builds, you're probably not going to play this. And I hate totem builds, so I'm probably not going to play this. That doesn't mean it's not strong, though. It is very, very strong. And lastly, we have Pathfinder. Pathfinder is also on the recommended list, believe it or not. I think Connected Chemistry and Enduring Elixirs is so strong that this is an entire like defensive setup for your character that is at the top of the game, right? At the top of the mountain here. Gaining more flash charges with natural, like we already know that there are nodes on the tree that will just cause you to generate charges passively. And then life flasks not ending when you use them means that having 100% uptime or just very good uptime is probably possible. And that's going to solve so much of your recovery issues, both for life and mana. And I think that alone is enough for a character to kind of get going. Outside of that, you just have options with this one. Running Assault, Relentless Pursuit, and Traveler's Wisdom are all just incredibly vaguely good. I don't know how good Brew Concoction is going to be, but if you need an exposure option, that I can guarantee will be rather strong, because the elemental ones do that. I don't know how scalable the bleeding and poison ones are, but assuming you can hook up supports to it, the scaling is going to be fantastic. And those will also be very good, because they even say they're going to help you do additional poison and bleeding damage. And they're even specified as unarmed, which I'm not sure what that means, but if there are unarmed bonuses in the game, that could have some interesting interactions as well. And then outside of that, it seems like if you want to go poison, this is the ascendancy to do it on. The spread will be nice for clear, and of course, doubling the number of poisons you can inflict on enemies is kind of a loaded ascendancy option. I don't know what the baseline maximum is, but if there are other ways to increase the cap and then you double it, this scales obscenely well. So Pathfinder, I think, is very strong as long as you're playing poison, or as long as you're willing to be flexible and maybe not the highest DPS, because running Assault and Relentless Pursuit, plus these two up here, are basically going to make you, as long as you don't get one shot, you're probably going to be able to just fight forever. And that's really what sticks out to me as kind of being good. This is another one that'll probably be really good to learn the game on. So I'm pretty excited about that. I'm excited about Path of Exile too in general, to be honest. Their release, the reveal kind of revealed that they have so much more going for it than I thought they would have at this stage in the game. I thought we'd be waiting 2 years before we had any sort of a decent looking endgame. I think we're closer than that. It'll probably be 6 months, right? A couple leagues, and then it'll feel really good. But what we have so far is already better than most games, and it's definitely enough to sink your teeth into. You can play the game hardcore for probably 2 weeks to a month and really not get anywhere close to bored, as long as you're having fun with it, especially with all the builds you can make. And that's kind of what this kind of game needs. So yeah, I hope everyone's excited. I hope this video maybe had you think about some of these passives, these Ascendancy passives in a new way, and had you considering, like, what do I do with, say, Warbringer that actually makes it strong? And there's some obvious synergies that go along these. There's probably some less obvious synergies that are going to be revealed and are strong, but I wanted to get this out and talk about what is obviously going to have good synergy and work together towards getting a build off the ground, because we just don't have much information right now. We don't know how anything is going to play. So what I'm looking at is, okay, what mixes together in an obvious way and will carry you? And things like Blood Mage, things like Titan, Warbringer before, Pathfinder even, Inquisitor, and Gemling Legionnaire look really strong for that. I think they have enough going in one direction or the other, or in all of them, to just kind of ensure you're going to have options and ways to solve your problems. Deadeye's probably fine, if not a little boring. Witch Hunter looks like it's going to be tricky and skill-oriented. Chronomancer's a complete unknown, because it's hard to say how good these skills are going to be and what can really take advantage of now and again, and then just the defenses at least look pretty concrete. Infernalist has a lot of powerful things going for it with big drawbacks, and generally the way the Witch Hunter drawback looks like over here with Sorcery Ward makes me a little concerned that Infernalist might not be strong enough for what you give up to make their things work. But there's definitely enough here that definitely has like a concrete number behind it that I could see someone making it work regardless. There's going to be builds for this. There's going to be builds for all of these that are going to feel good. I'm relatively certain, but there's some dangerous bait that I think you want to avoid taking. And unfortunately, I think until someone takes this and gives brutally honest feedback, GGG might just assume it's fine and untouched. So yeah. Or this is really good, right? This could actually be insanely good, and we just don't understand the mechanic well enough. But I reserve my right to be wrong, and I reserve my right to say I'm not going to touch that. Let someone else figure it out. And I think you should too, unless you're into that sort of masochism. Anyway, have a good one, Exiles. See you on Friday.